Good day, everyone. And first, I would like to extend my greetings to Venerable Dhammajiva, to Tara Demel, and to everyone else who's been involved in organizing this Mindfulness Summit in Sri Lanka. And I'm sorry that I could not be with you today, but I'm thankful that I was given the opportunity to speak a few words. The topic that I was asked to speak about is the relationship between mindfulness and global citizenship. And so the question that I will be discussing is whether the practice of mindfulness necessarily and invariably will make us better citizens, more responsible citizens, both in our own countries and in the exercise of our global responsibilities. In short, I'll be dealing with the question of whether the practice of mindfulness will enable us to have a more positive influence on the world. First, I want to speak about what I mean by mindfulness. Here, I mean mindfulness specifically in a meditative context as the attentiveness to the present moment and awareness of the present. In the practice of mindfulness, intention might be focused on a single object, as in the practice of mindfulness of breathing, or it can be an unfocused awareness, an awareness of whatever is happening without excluding other things from the mind. The conclusion that I've come to is that the impact of mindfulness on our role as global citizens is indeterminate. That is, mindfulness can have a positive impact only when it is integrated with a number of other factors, which I will discuss later. On its own, however, I would say that the role of mindfulness is highly variable. And as I say it, mindfulness can move in any of three directions. One direction is that the practice of mindfulness can lead to an inner withdrawal, which makes us increasingly indifferent to national and global affairs. In particular, I've observed that a number of Buddhist meditators, when they take up the serious practice of mindfulness, become completely indifferent to events taking place in their own countries and around the world. And if mindfulness is promoted in this way, it can even become an adjunct to governmental policies or programs of domination. That is, the practice of mindfulness can make us compliant, complacent citizens who are willing to conform to whatever our leaders decree. And we might think that opposing them and resisting them is a departure from the stance of pure observation. And instead of becoming involved in external affairs, we might withdraw into an inner absorption, which then allows the leaders to do whatever they want. A second possibility is that the practice of mindfulness may actually coexist with attitudes that are overtly harmful. The practice of mindfulness tends to intensify, to strengthen the mind, to make it sharper and more versatile. But the stronger and sharper mind can be used for purposes that we would consider ethically dubious, even for unethically and socially disruptive purposes. One example of this is the way the practice of mindfulness is being adopted in the commercial world, so that businessmen are training in mindfulness in order to become more effective in their business dealings, with the aim of increasing the profits of their corporations. This marriage between mindfulness training and business has become very prominent in the West, especially the US, and even the training in mindfulness has become a big business in the United States, a business which currently is worth in the billions of dollars. The third direction in which the practice of mindfulness can lead us is to make us more responsible global citizens. But for that to happen, something more than just the practice of mindfulness is needed. I don't think it's necessary to insist that the practice of mindfulness be embodied in the framework of the Buddha's teachings, but the Buddhist path can give us some perspective on the way mindfulness should properly be adopted. The Buddhist path begins with right view or right understanding. That leads to right intentions or right motives, namely the motive to be free from selfish desire, the motive to generate goodwill, and the motive to generate compassion. That then leads to the three ethical factors: right speech, right action, right livelihood, then to right effort. The effort to purify the mind, and then we come to right mindfulness. So right mindfulness comes seventh in the Buddha's path, where it's supported and embraced by the previous six factors. This provides us with a model for how we can apply the practice of mindfulness to our role as global citizens, whether as Buddhists, as followers of some other faith, or as secular followers without any faith commitment. In order to be practitioners of mindfulness and global citizens, I would say that the practice of mindfulness has to be embedded in a program that includes at least 4 other factors. So what are these 4 other factors? The first is what I call moral vision. And by this I mean the vision which sees our role as citizens of our countries and of the world, our role to be creating a society and a global order that is peaceful, that is ecologically sustainable, and that is guided by standards of economic and social justice. It would be a world where people of different ethnic origins, of different faiths, and of different ways of life can live together harmoniously within the same country, and where international relations are aimed at promoting the well-being of people of all countries throughout the world. The second supporting factor for mindfulness is what I call moral discernment or moral discrimination. This is the ability to distinguish between different national policies, different initiatives, different global programs, to determine which ones are truly conducive to the moral ideals that we cherish, and which proposals serve vested interests, the interests of some, but create harm and misery for others. This factor might correspond to sampajanya, clear comprehension of the Buddha's path, or perhaps even to panya, to wisdom. This is the factor that enables us to distinguish between falsehoods and truth, the factor that enables us to carefully investigate matters, to ensure that we aren't led astray by what is called fake news, by alternative facts, by false reports. The factor that prevents us from advocating policies that turn out to be harmful, and that gives us the ability to analyze different proposals to determine which ones will ultimately promote the greatest good. The third factor that should accompany the practice of mindfulness is moral courage. This is the courage to act on one's convictions, not to flinch, not to back down, not to turn away when the choice of the moral good poses personal risks, when it calls for resistance, even for struggle against those in positions of power who want to hold on to their power and seek their own good. This entails a willingness to stand against those who advocate violence and war, who oppress minorities and the vulnerable, who seek profit in ways that bring harm to others, the courage to resist policies that will lead to environmental disruption and destruction. The fourth factor that should accompany right mindfulness is moral integrity. This means that one's practice of mindfulness is embedded in a life guided by high ethical principles, above all by harmlessness, by compassion, and truthfulness. When we make a commitment to a life of moral integrity, then the practice of mindfulness can shine a spotlight on those aspects of our lives, of our conduct, that deviate from our ideals. The practice of mindfulness can also enable us to understand our own minds better, to ensure that even at the level of thought, the level of intention, we remain faithful to our ideals and that we're willing to act on these ideals in our role as national and global citizens. Okay, so looking at our role as global citizens in relation to the practice of mindfulness, to sum up, I would say that the practice of mindfulness can help us be better global citizens. But for this to happen, the practice of mindfulness must be guided and inspired by an uplifting moral vision. We must be willing to exercise moral discernment and discrimination between what is truly good and what is ultimately harmful. We must have the moral courage to act on our convictions, and we must be leading a life of moral integrity, a life of right speech, right action, and right livelihood. I hope these words will be helpful, and I thank you for the opportunity to share some of my thoughts with you today.